Welcome to Medicine with the Metals. I'm Mark, and this is Michelle. Join us as we explore psychedelics and psychedelic journeys. We have a great guest coming on a little bit later, but let's talk about some community updates.
All right. So Mama Dose,
Dose.
she's one of our affiliates, and she has got a product of the month so that you can get educated on each product. Okay.
It's
and
the 90-day supply.
The first one is the 90-day. Here it is. You've got all your instructions on the back. This medicine is the vegan capsules. Okay. Each capsule is 0.20 grams of psilocybin only. There are no fillers. There are 48 in the package, and this is a 3-month supply. We recommend taking it 4 days on, 3 days off, thus 4 capsules a week, and you 3 months worth.
They recommend.
So we put it on here. Right. That's right. So take it the 4 days on, 3 days off. You'll have 48 capsules. This is a great way to start microdosing. We offer a 15-minute free consultation with either Mark or myself and explain all the benefits to you.
There are some benefits to microdosing, isn't there?
There's lots of them.
And also, speaking of benefits, where are we going?
So we're both headed to Costa Rica separately, although we're going to meet up in Costa Rica, but you're headed first. Where are you going?
I'm going to, we had on our show a few months back, Iboga Central.
Soul Central.
Soul Central. I'm sorry. Soul Central.
Chore Boogie.
Great, good man. Resonated with him. I had sat with Iboga probably 2 years ago with Mark Howard, really good friend of ours. And now I have the opportunity to go sit with Iboga again, and very powerful medicine. I'm very looking forward to this experience and seeing what I gather out of it.
So by the time this airs next week, you will be already down there, and Mark's going to be going for 10 days. He will be sitting with Chore Boogie in Costa Rica. And then I fly down to Costa Rica on at the end of the month. So in about 2 weeks, I fly down there, and I am going to meet our tribe, the Shawanawa tribe. I'm going to Om Jungle Medicine in Samara, Costa Rica, and Mark is going to meet me there, and we have some things to talk with our tribe about, right?
Shava.
We're going to be bringing them to the United States.
It's
probably going to be next. It will be next year, but it's happening. So we're going down there to have discussions with them about that. We will sit with, or I will. I don't know if you will, but I'm going to sit with Mother while we're down there.
I love her.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. We're very excited. We get to see Angel at Om Jungle Medicine. Oh, and by the way, there is still one more spot left in her week long that's coming up. So contact me if you're interested in that and sitting with the Shawanawa tribe. We got lots of cool stuff going on.
We do. It's going to be a good end of summer, I could say.
What's going on Wednesday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern?
We have that killer live Q&A, because everybody wants to know about microdosing. Everybody wants to know about psilocybin. Everybody wants to know about macrodosing, the huge, great benefits they have. So we started a live Q&A called Microdosing with the Metals. Thank God our name is an S or Q, you know?
I know, right?
Q with the Qs.
Great name.
So anyways, it's really informative to come out here and start doing this with the microdosing. There's so many questions out there, and we are definitely here to answer them for you.
So we're going to invite you guys to come on with us. You can send questions ahead of time. You can jump on live. We're going to be on our YouTube channel. We'll be on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
But today let's talk about Ima Adaman. He shares his insights on integration, wisdom, traditions into the business practices, about the Eagle and Condor. He talks about the Eagle and Condor a lot.
Prophecy.
Eagle
and Condor prophecy. I didn't know anything about it. Of course, I've talked about the Hopi prophecy, which he actually talked about that a little bit too. I think it's such a beautiful prophecy. But this is the Eagle and Condor prophecy. He's got the eagle tattooed on his chest and the condor tattooed on his arm, and I couldn't explain it as beautifully as he did, but one has sort of taken over, right, until the other one comes in, and I couldn't really explain it, but he's going to.
Ima Adaman. He'll be with us next.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. We're excited to have him on, talk about, he actually helps facilitate business owners, right? So he brings them into ceremony and helps them so that they can increase their business.
Let's introduce Ima Adaman.
All right. So Ima, could you share with us your personal experience and background and how that has influenced your approach to transformational coaching and plant medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago with plant medicine and um, dialing actually all the way back to 10, 12 years ago. My journey started working with teenagers, young people. And so I've in my trajectory really centered in on the same core of work, helping people harness their potential and learn to love themselves in a journey. But it's shifted from running a nonprofit, working with young people, coaching adults, and now shifting trajectory upwards towards working with businesses. And so my personal journey sprouted at the intersection of letting go of this nonprofit, which turned out to be the week of my Saturn return. Little did I know until many years later and dialed back and looked at the dates that why is everything starting to fall apart and disintegrate inside of my life that I've built at this point. And about 6 months prior to that date was the first time I drank ayahuasca. And so like many people, it's easy in hindsight looking back at the journey to see how the pieces came together. But at the time, what I could notice that a lot was shifting and a lot was shifting fast. And so, um, right from the beginning, actually, the way that I met the medicines was pretty much everything all at once: ayahuasca, wachuma, peyote, all within 24 hours of each other. And so I was like confronted by all these master teachers. Um, what I can share that was really significant for me at a deeper level, beyond just the experience was, and this is really what I remember, was it felt like the first time meeting my grandparents. Yeah, I grew up not being raised, not having grandparents active in life, not really having grandparents who were alive, and some were not active and engaged. And it was the first impression that I felt from all the medicines was like, oh, this is what it feels like, to be held by an elder. Or this is what it feels like this is like the irreplaceable love of a grandparent. And so,
Hmm.
yeah,
Ho ho Sorry, I'm sorry, keep going.
no, go ahead.
I just find that so fascinating that you did okay, so it was ayahuasca, wachuma, and what was the third one?
Peyote.
Peyote within 24 hours. So, can you tell me how that went? What did that look like? Did you start with the grandmother and then move on?
Yeah, started with the grandmother, and then the way that this was set up from these teachers was the next day was, after a night of a little bit of sleep, waking up, working with the grandfather, and then the integration of the second grandfather, the peyote, was inside of cacao. So actually, there was four medicines: ceremonial cacao with the peyote mixed inside of it as a chaser, with the wachuma cactus. And all of that after this night working with grandmother. So to me, you know, it was such a beautiful weaving of the masculine and feminine. Obviously, I actually find it really supportive to balance energies, and you're also having completely different experiences, right? You're like learning through contrast. There's like some contrast being provided, and so and with these cactus medicines, for me, so powerful, so in the body, so in the heart that it helps move some of the energy that might come up with the grandmother experience for people.
Yeah, you're having like DMT with an alkaloid experience. You're having a DMT experience, and then you're having an alkaloid experience, and you're just changing a lot of things internally. Things
Yeah.
are going on. So, and then all those plants together, that's probably comforting and at the same time, probably very cosmic.
Yes.
That's a great description.
Hmm.
Very cosmic. What did you think of San Pedro? We love Wachuma. I think it's such a beautiful medicine, and it really is for me. It was like sitting with my grandfather, sort of up in this tree. But peyote, we have not sat in a peyote. I think they don't call it a ceremony, don't they? Call it a meeting, a
The
peyote
tepe,
meeting, and you
Yeah,
meet
with the
in the
with
tepe.
if you're sitting with the Native American church, yeah, they'll call it a meeting.
A
Yeah.
a
meeting,
meeting. Yeah.
correct? Okay, and so how? Tell us how that was different from the Wachuma.
The one description that I love, and I wish I could remember who first shared this with me, but they said, Wachuma is like it's like you have two grandfathers, which is normally true for most people. Yeah, it's like from your mother and your father's side. And the Wachuma is like your grandfather that puts you on his knee and rocks you up and down and is telling you stories and making you laugh and giggle, and the peyote is like the grandfather that teaches you tough lessons.
Yeah,
It's like
that's what I've heard.
gives you tough love, but not in a way that needs to be super tough. It's just loves you so much that is honest and direct with you.
It's very odd that almost all those alkaloid medicines out of that grandfather kind of, like Aboga, Wachuma, the
San Pedro,
peyote, San Pedro, it's like they're really
masculine.
masculine. And then you talk about the DMT medicines, ayahuasca. I have to keep psilocybin out because I don't think it has a plant value, and maybe I'm wrong by saying that, but I think it has a more mind medicinal value, and I think it has a more connection value. But it's very conducive to see how all these medicines and how they work. Very cool.
Yeah, masculine is something
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Very,
Yep.
always
very
mention to
true.
people, and also the way that things look, right? You're always told by looking at the Wachuma cactuses, you have this like tall phallic structure that's reaching towards the sun, and so yeah, it would be transmitting this information. But I do find it really interesting. I think that if you'll talk to certain, obviously, I'm sure you guys know this, certain cultures treat ayahuasca as masculine, and other cultures, I'm sure, treat the Wachuma probably without. So I think the bigger point is that it's more of a Western thing. I believe that we like need to like genderify and say this is masculine, this is feminine, because it's like some way of us mentally establishing our experience. It like creates certainty around how to explain our experience or put words to it. But I guess it depends how you relate to the creator. It could probably present itself in many ways.
Absolutely. I hear this flying around a lot, the Eagle and Condor prophecies. I don't know too much about it, but can you explain what it is? Because I see it online. I see people talk about it. What is this?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Eagle and the Condor prophecy is was originally, it's in short, it was said that around 1490, like 500 years ago, it was prophesized that this would be the onset of the eagle really stepping forward, and in this case, the eagle is the north, or I guess in this case you might even say the West, but for us this is like the North and the South. So the North, the North Americas, and the eagle represents in this case the masculine, the modern, the industrialized nations. It can also represent technology, the mind. The condor is the South Americas, the feminine, the intuition, the shaman, the medicines. Um, and so inside of this prophecy, in one particular way that it was shared, was that there will be a very strong, almost domination of the eagle for 500 years. And this was approximately from around like 1490 all the way to like 1990 or into 2000s. Um, and so now we're at, and they actually prophesized that to the extent that it might even take out the South. It might be so strong, the domination of the eagle, that it might even, however, there will be an opportunity after the onset of that 500 years, which is now, that the condor rises and there's space for the eagle and the condor to fly in the sky together, to circle in the sky together. And so obviously this is a metaphor in many ways of like the symbiotic nature of, if we don't work together, and we try to keep this like competitive scarcity take from competition alive, there's no way for us. But actually symbiotically, the very definition of symbiosis, we need one another to survive and to thrive. And so I think it's really beautiful. And the way that I think there's many ways to interpret it. How can, obviously we're seeing this explosion of psychedelics and plant medicines, and so how are we being supported, really, I think, from our mental health? Like, how has it come in that the condor has risen to support us, where literally we probably can't survive anymore without it? And vice versa, how can we be of support but not destruction to the South, right? How can this technology, how can we come together to let these things that we, this strong mental power that we do possess, or innovation or entrepreneurship in the way that I see it, be of benefit, so that it's all mutually beneficial, right? That there's not like a winner and a loser, or a victor and a defeated.
Well, it has to, especially in the plant medicine space. I mean, the masculine and feminine are so important. They're just like, it doesn't work without it.
Well, it's that duality. It's a duality. I don't think anything works without the duality, right? How does this shape the work that you do?
Yeah, so the way that I interpret it in this vision that I'm holding for leaders of the new era is to, and this was where it came from through the prophecy. Actually, when I was in Peru, it was really, I was in this vision, I was handed an eagle feather, from a Shipibo elder. This was inside of one of my ceremonies, handed me this eagle feather. And it took me quite some time to like understand, because I had been sitting with, um, for many years, right? I have an eagle tattooed on my one arm, on my left arm, and a condor tattooed tight on my right. This is my Instagram handle, Eagle and Condor. I've been working with this prophecy for many years, but to be completely honest, not fully with awareness that I hadn't really fully understood like what it was I was supposed to do with it. This was just something that felt really important to me. And so it's taken different forms, but in this form of this vision, I was handed this feather, and suddenly it dawned on me that, okay, this is time to move beyond just holding ceremonies and supporting and facilitating work with just people, like in healing circles and in prayer circles. And what would it look like to completely reprogram and redesign the companies and the businesses and entrepreneurs and leaders and thought leaders who are systemic change makers, right? And so like and the bigger question for me is, you know, what difference are we really making?
So tell us about how you incorporate this prophecy into the work you're doing.
Yeah, so the way that I interpret it has to do with entrepreneurship and innovation and leadership and businesses and companies. And I'll start by saying that there is this bridge I mentioned with mental health, but I think an important piece before I even share the vision that I'm leaning into is also the meeting of psychology and plant medicine. And this is something I've been really interested in lately. Of right, it's like we tend to think it's part of the human nature. We swing so far into one side of the pendulum, right? And so I think as a what I notice for a lot of people is they've probably spent many years trying something which might look like traditional Western psychological therapy, and so all of a sudden psychedelics and plant medicine, thank God, have risen and have surfaced. Now I think people are really deep onto this side of the pendulum working with psychedelics, and I think there's a really beautiful sweet spot in the middle between. And this is also what's presenting to me is this is another form of the Eagle and the Condor prophecy, right? I think we probably the North holds this pillar of psychology, while the South holds this, doesn't work with this traditional therapeutic approach at all. But a lot of people, a lot of clients that I work with, I notice really struggle. And I've really struggled in the past going too far into one direction and then forgetting some of the really basic core tenets. And these two are everything is meant to coexist. Everything is meant to like support one another. So the way the Eagle and the Condor prophecy shows up in the vision that I'm holding is with businesses through this vision called Leaders of the New Era. And this is a program that's designed to hold immersive retreats and leadership training for entrepreneurs, for leaders, for innovators, for businesses, and for companies.
In the plant medicine space or in
Yeah,
any space?
in utilizing plant medicine as a tool
Mm-hmm.
with these businesses and organizations and companies and leaders and entrepreneurs. And so with the vision of what would happen if we, we're the truth of it is, from my perspective, we've been living in this patriarchal dominated society for so long. And the way that presents itself in business life, we're using this word business, but really it's like all of life, is I think a very hyper masculine culture, which has different implications across all of our life, but it's really obvious with these businesses and companies and organizations. And not just I'm not just talking about big businesses, I'm talking about everyday, businesses and people who are doing any type of work for a living, and now entrepreneurs, coaches, this type of thing. We're still operating from this thing. And from my perspective, what I was shown is it's what are we plugged into, right? We're plugged into still plugged into this very masculine thing that, despite a lot of the healing that individuals might be doing who are operating inside of the system, we're still coming back to the system. I mean, this could be a rabbit hole, but look at even like politics. It's like until you change at the systems level, you're at some level going to come back to the same problem. and continue to repeat it. And so for my like the impetus for me is to look at how do we unplug that hypermasculine energy and then help these companies, businesses, organizations create an altar around their work that is integrated with the earth and with the elements and with the direction and with these medicines. And the truth of the matter is, not only will it be better for the planet, this is first and foremost, like can we create initiatives that are actually good for the planet, and because they're cohesive with the planet without trying to make them measurable or anything like this, just inherently good for the planet, but also good for the work that we're doing, like innovating. To me, entrepreneurship and innovation is like the greatest powerhouse of all time. I think it's like it can be leveraged in such a way that we will see systems wide change. But the path I'm taking is like, okay, let's go straight to the top, the people who are making big decisions and are the creators and the innovators and the change makers, and help them to almost like reprogram the DNA of the company and go from there.
And
what
what is
is
the response been?
we were going to say the same
It's
thing.
a new, it's a, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a new project. So where I'm at in the project now is I'm in a team building phase. I'm
Mhm.
training people to hold these ceremonies and facilitate in such a way based around the curriculum and the way that I do things. That's phase number one. Meanwhile, I'm working with people who are parts of these organizations, but not, at the organizational level itself. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
totally.
it's it's something that wants to move slowly, and this is part of what I was instructed to do with bringing this forward. And it makes sense because if we're going to create a high level of change working with people that are operating in these places, I think it needs to be meticulous.
And what does your coaching program look like? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I've been doing coaching for over a decade now, for a long time. Right now, it's really based around integration. That's deeply woven through the elements. I'm working with people. I have a quantum energy healing practice. That's actually what I bring into the coaching is the same way I run the ceremonies, and it's a little bit hard to understand that until you experience it. It's an experiential answer. Yeah. So once people sit in my retreats and ceremonies, they really get this, but it's called quantum creation. And so if you imagined that internal family systems, also known as parts work, hypnotherapy, energy healing, and quantum healing had a baby, this would be this would probably be the result. And it's bringing people through, and this is the same thing I work with companies and leaders too. It's bringing people through a process of getting really clear on their vision and bringing into. I don't ask people, for example, and this will explain how I do my coaching. I never ask people when they come into my ceremonies, what are you here to heal? I don't even ask people actually, what is your intention? I just ask people,
And
what are
why?
you
Why? What? Because I do the same thing. I don't really like the word intention when it comes to
interesting?
ceremony,
Mhm,
Yeah.
me either.
because my opinion of it is that it can lead to disappointment. It can lead
Very
to
much so.
resentment. It can lead to a lot of things,
Yeah.
right? If somebody says, well, I need to get this out of the ceremony, and they don't get it, because what I find is you get what you need, not what you
Mhm.
want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the reason I don't ask is because, and people talk about this in different ways, but you'll find the same person. This is a common thing that if you read books, people will share, like, oh, I've been to this Tony Robbins event and I see the same person who's been here for 10 years with the same intention, like working through the same thing. And that's not to say that's always true, but I
Right.
think that phenomenon is also very clearly, I think we can agree, very clearly existing within these plant medicine ceremony spaces too, right? It's like people are coming back over and over. And I think the reason that is because one, um, people can become addicted to their stories. Um, Two, I think what it's just true, what you focus on expands. If you keep talking about this thing, then it becomes a defined part of your egoic identity rather than an experience that could be reframed. So it's not to invalidate or to not create safe space for these things to be moved through. But the way that I like to do it is, if I ask the person, what are you focused on, like what are you here to create, what do you really want, like what do you want to feel, What is it that you want to feel? And we go into the quantum, and then let's say they come through, and let's say Mark is going through this process, and he says like, okay, I'm seeing that I want to create like a $20 million retreat center in Costa Rica, which is going to be filled with, these healers working with these two particular medicines. And I'm also like feeling really grateful and like fulfilled and satiated. My family is around me, et cetera, et cetera. Go really deep into the feeling state. And once you have that anchor point, and I'm also working with the elements with this, and this is how the ceremony unfolds for me as well with people. We're walking through the process, and then it's like, and what shows up for you, what is arising for you every time you think about like creating this, and now every time you think about expanding at any level like this, what comes up for you? What is the pattern that keeps stopping you? And what you find if you keep doing this process with people is it's the same thing, and that's the story. And so then you get to alchemize that story, and once you alchemize the story, you can find its opposite, which is also the energy that's required for the person to create the thing that they like dialed into. And so you can see the difference in this, because instead of starting with why you can't do something, which is the story and the experience or maybe a trauma that somebody's had, then the person just keeps regurgitating reasons why they can't do the thing, rather than like setting a really clear arrow and then walking towards the process with somebody.
And you know what? That starts at such a young age too. It starts at such a young age. And then you go through that, and then you get stuck in that cycle, and you keep telling yourself that story. And what I think plant medicines do for sure is they really work on that default mode system. So when you can erase part of your crazy thoughts, because our thoughts are just fucking crazy, really, because we wouldn't stay in that cycle of stuck if they weren't. So what psychedelics do is they break that thought process, and then your default mode system comes offline, and now, you're becoming to think of something you haven't thought before. Now you can create, because now you're not restricting yourself by your same story. But most people can never get to this point, and that's a shame. It's really sad, because I think there's a lot of things psychedelics do. They bring up that fear, and once people face to face with some kind of fear, they're never going to overcome that. And I think what psychedelics, for me, I can only speak for me, is once I started understanding I have to face all these fears, or I'm never going to be fearful, then this is what I'm going to be stuck with. And it's just these stories you keep telling yourself. Like a good friend of mine, Ken Staley, used to say, you're always telling yourself a story, so why don't you create the new chapters? Everybody wants to stay in chapter one. We sit in chapter one forever. When are we going to end our story?
Well, I love how you said people get stuck in their story, right? People
Absolutely.
get stuck in the darkness. I have somebody who's very close to me who, had gone and died in ayahuasca many, many, many times, right? Over and over and over again. And Mark and I believe that the true, what is necessary of that experience is integration, right? Without integration, It's nothing. And so this person just kept going back, going back, going back. And I remember an integration coach said to me, she loves the darkness. She is stuck in the darkness, and she loves the attention, right? Going back to ceremony, and I'm stuck in my story, and this is me, and this is what happened, and you get stuck in that story. Just like you said, it's comfortable, right? Who are you without that? Who are you without your story?
Yeah, there's, just to inject also like a trauma-informed lens here too, the people will say, one way of saying this is people can become addicted to a familiar hell. You'd rather be in a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so like with chaos as a baseline embedded into somebody's nervous system, right? If you grew up in a chaotic household, if you grew up with a lot of childhood trauma or any childhood trauma, one of the things that can happen is that you unconsciously seek out chaos in order to like realign with your baseline. And so it's not, the truth is, if it was easy, we would all make our way easily out of these things, right? But it really isn't easy to redefine that default setting and that baseline when you've had significant trauma. It's a lot of nervous system work.
It's very difficult.
My God.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is your nervous system, and there's some, I go back to these alkaloid medicines, because I think those really are the ones that reset that nervous system. ayahuasca, the DMTs have a way to. I think they're purgatories. I think they more release. I think like wachuma, aboga for sure. I mean, these medicines just they replace, and if that makes sense, it's different. When you're replacing who you were, and you can just do new things. You really morph into something different with these alkaloids. Alkaloids are a little different than psychedelics.
Yeah, and then in pathogens like MDMA
Hmm.
are also
Yep,
a different thing, right? So you
sure.
have like
Hmm.
hallucinogenics and pathogenics, and I think it's an
Yep,
important distinction because I'm not sure a lot of people know about the difference or pay attention to the difference, right?
They
And
don't. Most
also,
people don't.
I'm glad you brought up this piece, right? Tryptophan's psilocybin is also considered, in the tryptophan family with ayahuasca and 5-MeO DMT and others. And
yep.
so, one thing I say to people, this isn't always true, but I think it's important, and it's probably not talked about enough, is that, there is a very real opportunity to re-traumatize yourself when you work with tryptophans in general. It's something you have to be aware of. And so, who knows for your friend? I don't know the context, but I personally have witnessed lots of friends who have been and I'm not even saying that this is bad, right? I'm non-dualistic, so I would say everything is perfect. If you get re-traumatized and you go back into it, there's a beautiful opportunity to heal, and it was probably meant to happen this way. But uh, it's also really scary and really, really challenging, and can take people out for a while. And just like you said, Mark, right? It's because it's a purgative. It's bringing the trauma back up a lot of the times, whether directly or indirectly, to then clear from your system and to work with. But if the person's not resourced to work with that, it can reactivate the trauma, and then you can get stuck in it a little bit. And this is something that you see sometimes, which is different. This is one of the reasons I'm so fascinated with MDMA, for example, as an
Mm.
empathogen, because it actually does the exact opposite physiological response. It turns your amygdala and your fight or flight response off. This is the part of your brain that's literally getting fired when you're on ayahuasca, right? Because you're going through this thing. There might be or mushrooms. You're going through this thing. A lot of fear comes up. Yes, you can rewire the neural pathways. But what's interesting about the MDMA is when your amygdala is off, you literally can't be in a trauma response. So it gives you an opportunity to go into, perhaps for your friend, and see the exact same thing, but have no emotional reaction to it, have no charge around it, and not be attached to any story around it. And so I love also pairing these things, because if
Yes.
you work with like the quantum energy method of like guiding people through a particular process while their amygdala is not firing and not engaged and they're not creating any stories, to Mark's point, you have this golden opportunity, I believe, to really help somebody rewrite the story of like, okay, how do you
Several
want to
months
relate to that?
several months ago, I went to a women's retreat, and the medicine was a combination of psilocybin and MDMA, and it was taken together at the same time. I had never done that. Well, that's not true. I've taken MDMA, and then a number of hours later, taken a microdose of psilocybin, and it was a beautiful experience. But this was an actual flood dose of both, and wow. Now, the way that it was explained to me was it's such a beautiful experience because the MDMA, just what you were just talking about, and I can't say it as beautifully as you did, but it allows you to look at what's happening with the psilocybin with a completely different point of view. Completely different. It was a really big experience. A really big experience for me. It was probably the first time actually in a medicine ceremony that I almost blacked out. I don't really remember. I don't really remember. I just kind of woke up and I didn't sleep, but it was such a big experience. And all of the messages came afterwards. Combining those two medicines was just incredible.
Yeah. I like to call the MDMA the Joe Dispenza of the plant medicine world. That's the way I'll explain it to people if they haven't worked with it in a ceremonial setting, right? Many people obviously have like taken ecstasy and MDMA in a rave setting, and which I also find really interesting, right? How do medicines, the whole conversation, how do these medicines find people in even seemingly unconscious ways at different chapters of their life? And I've had many people, right in the midst of it, be like, "Oh wow, I'm having this realization that like I looked at the use of this MDMA in the rave setting as like this very unconscious party drug, but actually that was such a healing for me at that point in my life. Like that was the medicine finding me. Like I really needed this channel for my dance or my movement or my expression or my creativity. it was like a lifeline. So it's also fascinating how we find these things. Yeah.
I agree with that. I completely agree with that as well. I think that, sometimes taking some of these medicines to, I mean, I don't want this to sound to let down some inhibitions and be able to enjoy yourself, right? So maybe you do take something like that at a show or doing something like that. I'm not against this. It is about setting and intention, and so that setting and intention. Some people have a very difficult time with certain things, and so taking a microdose of psilocybin before doing this or doing certain things, I am not opposed to this. We are not. We are in this for the mental health. Everything we do is about the mental health, but I don't believe that we always have to learn through darkness and, suffering. We can learn through laughter and joy.
Which is why I absolutely love, to Mark's point, the cacti, specifically the wachuma. This was like this was a huge breakthrough for me personally in my journey. Was it almost came so subtly. And this is something I find so fascinating. There's so many fascinating things about San Pedro cactus, but for many people, for the first few journeys, it can be very subtle. There's like a subtlety that you have to like work through. And for me, my understanding of it was my mind couldn't grasp that healing could look a different way. I was like working with this belief system of like, wait, am I healing? Can I heal like this way? Right. Again, programmed that it needs to be this peak experience, programmed that I need to go through this big somatic release, but actually for me personally, this isn't true for everybody, but I would suspect it might be true for a lot of people in this space. I spend plenty of time navigating through the shadows and the darkness, right? It's like we're all deep people moving through really deep things, especially in the times we live in now. I actually think that the opportunity and the potential to heal through the sunshine, literally to heal through the light, to like access joy, to your point, to like let the guard down, is why it's specifically that Wachuma cactus has been such a beautiful teacher for me, because it's like giving me permission to, this is the healing that I need, is to actually just like be playful and innocent and myself and let my inner child feel safe.
Yeah, because if anybody out there if wants to dip their toes into a really psychedelic experience and not really have one of these crazy, it is definitely Wachuma. I mean, it's a very mild psychedelic. It's very kind, and it's not really too visual.
It's almost
So
like lucid dreaming.
yeah, and it's very. I mean, you could walk, you could talk, you could. I mean, that's why they call them Wachuma walks. You walk for 10, 12 hours, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just a different medicine that's not really, like you say, it teaches you stuff like while you're just there, and
But it's
food
so
tastes like
subtle. It's so
fantastic. I
subtle.
mean, like I don't never remember like eating strawberries and they were like everything just tasted like wow, this is just like crazy, man. And it's something about that. Not all psychedelics do that, but Wachuma really brings out something weird. It was just wow, brought out the flavors in your mouth. Just it was just different, very different medicine. And microdosing Wachuma is
It's a
very
very
interesting
beautiful
too.
practice.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
something that I am very engaged with, is the microdosing of Wachuma and learning more and more about every day.
Yeah, it's a really grounding type of medicine. So
Very
much.
grounding. We know a beautiful Wachuma server up in Vermont
Sure.
who we brought down and did a ceremony with, or a retreat with, several years ago, and it is absolutely a beautiful medicine. Well, talk to us about your retreats and walk us through your retreats. What does that look like?
Yeah, so bringing people together for, I like to blend, the medicines that, like we're saying, in this in gender-defined way, the masculine and the feminine, giving people an opportunity really for both experiences. Yeah, so I'm naming that in this last part of the conversation that I love focusing healing through joy and innocence, but I also think there is like a space for release, and there is a space for um, revelation, in a way, like clarity beyond like an emotional stuckness. But I think having both is really important. I think, like I said, I'm a trauma informed somatic oriented facilitator, so for me it's really important to carry everything through that lens. And what that means is I really work with people's sensitivities and subtleties. I prefer to start slow with people and to establish trust and safety. Um, I often like to integrate and incorporate when I have access to working alongside different Indigenous elders. So for different parts, whether it's after the retreat, at the end of the retreat, inside of the retreat, um, weaving in, I'm here in Arizona and from Sedona. And so weaving in people who are local to the land and can share their wisdom. And we had a beautiful, actually, speaking of the Eagle and Condor prophecy, I brought in a Hopi elders to this last retreat to do, coming from the water clan. And so he did a prayer over the waters in Sedona with this group that we had. And unbeknownst to me, because I fully trusted him and just invited him to share his magic, he pulls out an eagle and condor feather and starts explaining the eagle and the condor prophecy to all of us without even knowing like my connection to this prophecy, without even knowing whether or not that had like played a part inside of this retreat. It's just what he was guided to do. He's like, this is what I've been like told I was supposed to do. And so um,
There are no
it's really,
coincidences.
no, I was just had a big smile on my face, right? And so, just working with the land and the elements. And so that's an important thing for me too, is like, yes, I love people having their deep medicine experiences, but exactly to your point, Michelle, the integration is really, really important to me. So how do you build even the integration into the experience itself while it's happening, right? Sometimes like supporting people, bringing people to do body work, letting people be out on the land, letting things really like anchor into the body so that like having space in between ceremonies, like a lot of space for people to speak and to like move through what they're working with, um, so that not just so you can make sense out of things, but so that it can really like sustain itself. So I really try, both with the vision that I'm holding for working with these companies as well as people coming through the retreats, to create long-term relationships with people. I really don't believe in like quick fixes. It's something that I everybody has their own path, both as a participant and as facilitator. I've been on every side of everything, so full respect for what everybody chooses. But um, I also suspect that if we were to place ourselves inside of this prophecy to bring it back, and we're having a conversation of like the North and the South, um, many of these indigenous would find it very absurd that we would expect to move through some of these things quickly. Yeah. So I think from like a trauma informed lens, I'd rather have somebody opt into a longer term relationship of like, okay, here's honestly what you're working with. Here's where you want to go again. What are you creating and moving towards? What arrow are you firing forward? Identifying what's there and then giving ourselves time and space. And maybe that looks like a number of ceremonies. I do private ceremonies, couple ceremonies, group ceremonies, retreat ceremonies, organizational. So finding what works for the person, customizing it, and then saying, okay, this is maybe like what it will look like to work together over a longer period of time. Because, we've both probably had this experience. Sometimes these blast off peak experiences uh, can even do more damage than good, right? If you don't have if you don't know that somebody's there with you for the entirety of what you're saying yes to. And that I think is probably a longer conversation, whether we want to get into it, but it's a symptom of like how we're approaching this and what are we saying yes to and facilitating as facilitators? And then what do we have capacity for? Right. Like, so if you're running 50-person ceremonies once, like 3 times a month, consistently, unless you have a big team, how are you going to have capacity to, and then what is in place to support people afterwards? I think these are just really good
It's
questions.
definitely why we started what we started. And I've been working with these medicines for going on like 5-6 years now, and the best thing for me to have ever happened was COVID, because COVID gave me the time to integrate. So our true belief is you have to integrate these medicines 30. Don't dive into something right away and go back to work. Give yourself some time to understand. Just give yourself a break. Just give yourself some time. So I can imagine you're probably from Canada with your accent, and they're so far ahead of us with their psychedelic information. So,
So
where
far.
do you see the future visions? I mean, when me and Michelle were in Vancouver, I mean, there's psilocybin stores on the corner. It's like, okay. But the future of their medicine, they understand psychedelics a little bit more. Where do you see the future of the Western world going? I mean, I think psilocybin's picking up and gaining traction, but where do you see the rest of this going?
Well, we were going to say MDMA is next, but as of yesterday, it's certainly not, is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it's going,
I think
and
it's underground for a while.
and some part of me thinks it should be, to be
Yeah,
We do
for
honest.
too.
sure. Me
We do
too.
Yeah,
too.
I have a lot
Mhm.
of concerns and worries, as many people do in this space, about like what then happens, right? It's like the catch-22. What then happens when things are commercialized, including pharmaceutical companies? What are people getting their hands on, and why, and how are they approaching it? So I think it stays underground. I agree with you, Mark, for a while. Um, yeah, it's your question is just what it's reminded me of is this very interesting podcast. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the Emerald podcast, but
No.
I have not.
you should. As
Okay.
podcast hosts,
Write
it's
it
hard
down.
to even call it a podcast. It's really like a multimedia experience, deeply, deeply moving, with like woven in professional music, storytelling, and it's focused around animism, which is basically the belief that all things are living. Yeah. And
Yep.
so, from this animistic point of view, he tackles in part of this conversation. The name of this particular episode is "The Revolution Will Not Be Psychologized." And so, he's speaking to, yes, we're talking about like psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. This is a beautiful thing, something I'm deeply interested in, as I mentioned. But he's exploring at a real level, at a human level, like, what is that going to look like when a person is sitting across a person whose job, from a psychological standpoint, professionally and therapeutically, is to explore the levels of the psyche, while the person has induced this substance, which purpose is to completely deconstruct and eliminate the psyche. Like, what is going to happen when those two things meet each other in real life, not just in theory of like we think this can help people? And I found it so fascinating because obviously there's amazing, beautiful work being done around this field and with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and also I think it's a really powerful question. So
You know what I
that's
think
that's what I
happens?
that's what I
Can,
wonder is what it's gonna look like. Yeah.
I think this happens. I think finally psychotherapists and therapists finally have something to talk to with their patients because every week it's the same story, the same story, the same story. Throw some psychedelics in. It's not going to be the same story next week. So now we have some communication going. Now we have some actual authentic stuff going on. And until we get to that point, we'll never be to that
But
point.
here's the other problem, though, because we have a very good friend of ours who is a psychiatrist in Oregon. Okay. And she has now done the switch over, right? And she is offering psilocybin assisted therapy, and she's not happy with it because she has to charge her patients $2,000 a session, which is obscene. She knows it's obscene. So, this is what's going to happen at first. I mean, it may calm down, but Mark and I always talk about. I mean, there's still going to be the underground like us, and people are probably going to choose that route because who wants to go pay $2,000 to sit with somebody in a psilocybin office? And that's insane.
We just need to educate people. Once we educate and inform people and they know that these medicines are safe, that the death rate of psilocybin is fucking zero, zero. Nobody's ever died from psilocybin. Nobody's ever died from cannabis. Now there's other big medicines. I won't go into them, but there's some there's some dangers to them. But for those two in general, there's never been a clinical death. So the fear is the fear they've created. So we need to educate and inform people. I think that's the biggest thing right now. Once we do that, I think people will find their own pathways.
Yeah, again, this comes back to just trusting the medicine. If this is where we're at with it, I trust it. It has its own. It's like full trust and surrender and detachment. Like,
Yep,
you led me here, we led each other here, and not everything is always rainbows and butterflies as well. It's
I
absolutely
an
agree
it's
not.
an
with
it's
that.
an important lesson to learn, right? It's like when
You
people
think
hit a really hard turn in the road with some of the medicines, they're like, "Oh wow, like this was really beautiful to start. I don't know if I want to be on this like medicine path anymore. This is getting kind of gnarly." And so at a collective level, maybe we need to go through some gnarly bumps in the road where it's not all rainbows and butterflies, and where does the 5D meet the 3D? There's eventually we're going to have to confront legal structures, how does, like ethics, morals, codes, distribution, these things are things we're going to eventually have to tackle one way or another.
Well, you know what I think? I think that these medicines are a lot smarter than we are as humans. And when I hear people talking about, ayahuasca, and they're going to put ayahuasca in a pill, and ayahuasca, we're not going to have any left in the jungle. And these medicines, just like the earth, are smarter than we are. And just like you said, I mean, they're guiding us to what we need to do. So if we're going through this as then that's what we need to go through, right? I do not believe that I mean, we support the Shawanawa tribe out of Brazil, and 6% of all of our proceeds go to them. We believe in giving back to the indigenous 150%, right? They
And they're
brought
not
us these
hairy.
medicines. And they're not hairy. You didn't
So,
say
and
that. Anyway, we just, we believe in these medicines
yeah, definitely.
so much.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome to be where we are right now, because I mean, I actually think we're going to see a breakdown of the system. I mean, sometime soon, and
For
like you
sure.
said earlier, we have to see a breakdown. People don't understand a breakdown. What do you mean? I mean, like you say, we can't go back to this. I mean, if we do, it's going to keep being this. Okay, it's going to keep being this tutorial system that it, there is no living life anymore. Living life ended right before COVID. It really did. I mean, the last 5 years have been a really crazy time, really crazy, and nothing seems real anymore. There's going to be something that's breaking down.
But
What it
it's been an
is, I don't know.
awakening.
It's been
Don't you
for
feel
many,
people are
for
waking up?
many. Yep, for sure.
I, I'm I'm always curious around that question.
Yep, yep.
In what way?
I think yes, it's taking different forms. It doesn't feel as like straightforward to me. For
Hmm.
example, with I this actually the first time I've ever heard this ayahuasca in a pill thing, so I'm like still processing
Yeah,
these things.
ayahuasca in a pill,
Yeah.
right? You go to the doctor and take a pill. That's crazy.
Who knows? We're gonna be so yeah, it's like trusting the intelligence of the medicine and also checking the ego of the human at the door, right? We are humans who incessantly try to like control and manipulate things out of this like deeply ingrained scarcity program of lack that makes us think that we need to meet our basic survival needs. And so yeah, what do? We project, we manipulate, we control people. Why would we not try to project, manipulate, and control plants? I've heard tons of people say this, right? I'm sure you have too. Like they'll start even projecting onto the plant. The plant made me do this, and then maybe it lied to me and told me. It's like, no, you get to just take radical responsibility for your thoughts and your feelings and your actions. The plant didn't do anything except like pull the veil down and have you look at whatever it is you need to look at. And not everything you see is 100% true. So if you also believe that, then that's something that you have an opportunity to investigate. Like, why also do you believe that? Where is that like coming from? So I think I think where I stand with, there is definitely an overharvesting of, for example, ayahuasca. It's a real thing, I think,
Hmm.
right? And I
For
think
sure.
it would be the same thing with like it's not any different. We're overharvesting everything. There's no trees in the
Sure.
Amazon. There's no ayahuasca left in the jungle. It's like we're moving in a certain direction. And so, yes, we will be eventually the intelligence, the medicine, I believe, will check us and humble us as it does. And it would be good. And if we could have received and integrated and embodied enough of the learning from the plants that we don't need to get that far in order to learn the lesson.
Do you think
Absolutely.
that'll happen
Well,
though?
I don't know.
It feels unlikely in my body as you're asking me,
Yep.
but I'm optimistic. I trust. I mean, things. Listen, we're evolution is happening fast right now. Like
Very
to
fast.
speak
Yes.
to the
You know,
awakening piece, what I will say is things are moving quickly.
too quick.
So yeah, too quickly. And
Hmm.
to your point of integration, this is something I love talking about and sharing as well. Is you know it's not always, aside from just it's not always the most, what's the most supportive thing, is it, to your friend's point, is it supportive to go back and keep like doing over and over, like with this, with no space in between and no learning and no time for like nature and diet and nutrition and sleep and embodiment. um but when the world is also moving this fast, we also get to slow down, I believe. It can be like too much, too fast, too soon, which is the description of trauma. It can be like a lot for people and very overwhelming if you're constantly in these like quantum realms moving at this speed that you move out with these medicines. And we're not in the same world we were in 10 years ago, where perhaps that was possible.
Mm-hmm. So
Well,
true.
things are becoming possible now. Like we had a great conversation today. You're a really cool guy. I think you're on the right track. I think thinking, dealing with these businesses and starting at that level, I think we can change. I think we can change people's thought processes, but I think it's going to take a lot of time. I mean, me and Michelle think that, we thought after we did these podcasts and did this and did that, everybody's going to want to do psychedelics. Everybody's going to do this. They see how much we changed. Everybody's going to want
You
to
mean
do it.
that's not what happened?
It's not what
Not even
happened.
close. Because I
Oh.
think we see these drastic changes, but people can't accept them yet. And, we're just here to educate and inform. And when I see my brother-in-laws and my sister-in-laws and my mom starting to do psilocybin when they were shunning us, things are changing.
Things are changing. People are
At their own
waking
at
up.
their own speed and
At their own speed.
and the perfect time that's like perfect for everybody, right? We all have
For
different
sure.
souls that choose different like rates of growth and
Mhm.
ways to learn. Sometimes we need to like learn through saying no to a loved one that keeps incessantly trying us to try the psychedelic. Maybe that's the learning for the family member. It's just the no until
Mhm.
suddenly, it takes them in a different path and something shift. I think, I really believe that it's what people believe is possible. So we'll see what happens. Even with these companies, it's like, why are we continuing the way we are with the world? Why are we continuing the way we are with the earth? Why are we continuing the overharvesting? Why are we perpetuating these things? Why are we still adopted into like jobs and economies or political systems right now when
Mhm.
we're continuing to say yes to systems level things which we fundamentally disagree with, sometimes vehemently disagree. So why?
Because
Probably
they know
because
at the end of the day, if they continue this way, there won't be nothing left. So they know they have to do something different because they know continuing this way is demise to the world. I mean, there ain't no butterflies left. There ain't no fucking lightning bugs. There ain't no bees. Listen, these things been around for millions. And if they're gone, we don't be enlightened by that. This world is, Mother Earth is really powerful. And how do I say this being kind? We've really fucked her over. And it's not kind what we're doing to her. And she's pretty angry right now. And I think we're going to see some big changes in the next few years.
yeah, we'll receive learning in the way we need to, but I really feel when people believe something else is possible, they'll choose it. Right. I
Sure.
Yeah.
really I
Sure.
really learned this in entrepreneurship, like the medicine of entrepreneurship to me, and maybe you guys have had this
Sure.
experience is I can work with somebody for a long time, and if somebody's, for example, in a traditional 9 to 5 job, but they really want to be an entrepreneur, the only real thing that like needs to shift is that they believe it's possible to get what they have in their 9 to 5 job or more. And so now apply that mindset to healing, right? Exactly what you're saying. If the person really can see, if you can help the person see, or they can like come into a scene within themselves, oh, I can receive the same or more healing that I have kind of received in this thing called therapy, the way my mind compartmentalizes in this thing that feels uncertain and scary, the same way entrepreneurship feels uncertain and scary to people. And so, of course, they're going to resist the thing that's uncertain to their ego, that feels unsafe and scary. But I think the bridge is not just pushing. It's like, okay, why do people feel unsafe? Because many of us are traumatized, right? So how do you build trust and safety? How do you build relationships with people and help people build relationships with themselves, where they can trust you, where they can trust themselves, where they can trust God, Goddess? And when
You
they
keep
have
them
that,
separated.
yes, and when they have
When
that,
you
then
keep
there's
them separated,
possibility. Right. And that's clearly, to your point, Mark, that's not the agenda, right? So as if they keep us away from that line of thinking and into the separation line, then we continue on chart just as they planned. And if we start to say, okay, maybe something is possible over here, more opens up. Yeah.
Well, you're a cool guy. This was a really good conversation. I like what you're doing, and I like how you are addressing sort of at the top, right? Let's get in there, and then it's sort of a downfall, right? It tears down.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Where can we find you?
Yep.
Yeah, on Instagram, Eagle and Condor, just like the prophecy, and that's the best place. People are welcome to reach out there, send me a message, and happy to connect and share more information.
Well, great conversation today. Thank you very much. Any last words, Michelle?
We sure appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.
Ciao.
See you later.